welcome back to my channel. Today we're gonna do some maintenance on the buggy. So I decided to make a video to show everyone how to change the Rockwell axle boots. These are silicone boots that kind of hold the axle and the knuckle together, so not to let oil spill out. They are a different design than the other axles where they have open knuckles like Dana 60. It's nice and it's not nice. You know, it's nice that oil from the inside the axle are going to travel through the knuckle and kind of lubricate the U-joints, etc. The not so nice thing about them is that they actually rip over time and oil starts leaking all over the place. So normally I get about 2 years before I have to change a boot, sometimes less depending if it gets ripped or not. So the first step is I'm going to show you what kind of tools we need to do this procedure. I'm going to do the disassembly, and then after that I'm going to put it all back together. I'll give you all the torque specifications and you get to watch me work on the buggy for a little bit. Alright, so first of all, this is a flipped Rockwell hub. So usually they don't come like that on the stock 2.5 ton military trucks. The flange is actually on the outside. So, but the nice thing about these axles is that you can flip them in, and then that will significantly reduce the width of the axle. So this is something nice. The only problem with that is when you have to disassemble the knuckle, you have to pretty much remove the hub completely and disassemble the bearings inside in order to get to the knuckle. So basically this is what I have here. Just kind of a quick note, I don't have stock Rockwell shafts. These are aftermarket Uverson shafts, so if you're doing a stock Rockwell axles it's going to look different, but it's the same principle. And the other difference that I have on my axle is I actually have a high steer arm. This high steer arm is custom made, and I also built a brace for it here to the knuckle. Normally it doesn't come like that. It comes with there's kind of a protrusion here where the steering tie rod goes in here, but mine is somewhat aftermarket and it's elevated. So the first thing I need to remove is these the steering. So you remove all the steering, and then the next step is basically remove those bolts. These are 3/4 inch bolts. And then once these are out, you have to use a special socket. That's the word I'm looking for. So it's a special socket. This is a 3-inch socket here, and I'm not sure where you can buy it. I've had this one for a long time, and this is for removing the nuts inside. These are pretty big nuts that hold the axle, the bearings together. So once you remove those, there's two of those nuts. You remove them and then you can pull the whole hub out. And once you have the whole hub out, then you have to remove these bolts here. These bolts are the spindle bolts. And then after that is done, you can pull the spindle out. And then you start removing the high steer arm. Like for me, my high steer arm here is 7/8 nuts. So I remove those, and I remove the bottom bolts, and I have also an aftermarket kind of protector here. It's a guard for the axle, so I'm gonna have to take that one out. And actually bolts at the bottom here that you can just pull out. And then once all these are done, I come back here and I remove this nut and bolt here that is clamping the boot onto the knuckle. And once I get these out, I can just lift the knuckle out and pull it out. So that's pretty much it. This is I'm gonna start doing it. See, the aftermarket Uverson hubcaps, uh, they have a little seal that goes in a little groove. However, I still put a little bit of silicone around, just kind of an extra safety precaution, not to get any water in. It normally doesn't take this long to get the cap off, but I'm not sure what happened today. As you can see here, basically, you can see where the nuts are, so you gotta take them out. There's a little kind of a spacer in between the two nuts, and it has some little pieces of metal here that you can bend over, but I've never really bent them over, and I never had any issues with any one of them loosening up, so it has worked pretty good for me. You have to be careful because the hub is pretty heavy. First nut is out, then the spacer, washer, spacer. And then there's only one more nut here. And this one's not super tight. Okay, so the hub's pretty much ready to come out now, so all I have to do is just kind of pull on it and it will come out. I usually put my hand like that so the bearing and it doesn't fall out. So, and then I'm gonna just put it right over there. There you go. Okay, so now I have the spindle exposed. And we have the inner bearing exposed. So there's two bearings on it. There's a larger inner bearing, and then there's a smaller outer bearing that is in the hub. And then so finally, as you can see here, I exposed the bolts for the spindle. So if you're using any aftermarket tires, like anything bigger than 44-inch tires, 43, 44-inch tires, what I usually do is I actually upgraded the bolts, the spindle bolts. There's lots of them, probably around 12. I upgraded them all, and I'm not using the stock bolts. I'm actually using grade 9 bolts. You know, just in case, you know, just extra precaution. They don't cost a lot of money, and they're makes things a lot better this way. So before you remove these bolts, they're gonna be super dirty. So what I normally do is I actually cover the bearing. Well, before I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove some of the grease here first, because I'm going to have to put some fresh grease on when I'm going to be assembling it. I don't want any dirt to get stuck on the grease, so I'll just take it out. And this is a great time to inspect the bearings, to make sure that they're all good and there are no issues. Okay, so what I do now is I just kind of lay down a rag and just kind of wrap it around so dirt doesn't fall on the bearing when I'm getting the bolts out. Alright, so for the bolts, they are 9/16. gonna start coming out because it's full of oil inside. Okay. All right, so I have to use the chisel. Just kind of slowly try to hold it with my legs, just in case it doesn't fall off. I don't want it falling off. Go. Okay. Once again, put a rag on the ground. Just make sure I pulled it out. Just lay it on the ground. Still needs a little bit. So a whole bunch of oil is going to come out now. Okay. This is a great opportunity to inspect the axle shaft, the U-joints, and everything else. Okay. So once that's done, basically try to remove the knuckle now. Be a little bit messy because there's still going to be a little bit of oil underneath. So okay. Alright, so as you can guess, this is a little bit of a messy job, but part of the maintenance, I guess. Okay, so I can get this guy out. There's kind of a Kingpin spacer here. You make sure not to mix them up. So like this is the upper one, and I put it on the side, and with the heist to your arm, and then basically just kind of release the clamp. There's also a spacer. There's also a spacer underneath, and this one might be a little bit difficult to get out. So I'm gonna have to use the chisel. Pry it out. There you go. Okay, so it's all out. This is a lower one. I make sure not to mix the upper and the lower. And so to get it out now, you just kind of lift up and then you slide it out. There you go. The whole axle is disassembled now. Okay, so there's another little clamp inside now. And this little clamp kind of holds the inside of the boot onto the inner C of the axle. So that's pretty much it. I just usually leave the axle shaft in because there's no point of taking it out. I mean, you can take it out if you want to inspect the inside of the splines. I don't have any worries about these axle shafts. They're pretty big. I just inspect the U-joint and grease it out, and I'm gonna clean everything out and clean every single component, and then I'm gonna reinstall everything, and then make sure everything is good, inspect, to clean, etc. Probably gonna take me an hour to do that. And once I'm ready to put everything back, I will restart filming, and I'll give you the torque specs of everything that I tightened. All right, so cleanup is complete. Just gonna show you all the components that I have here. So first of all, I have my high steer arm over here. It's all cleaned up, and what I do is I actually use studs for it. Studs are a little bit stronger than bolts, so I use studs, and there's a grease fitting on it. This is a custom one. This is the upper Kingpin cap, if you want. If you ever mix the upper and the lower, see the upper has a shoulder here that is a little bit bigger than the lower. So as you can see, this is the lower here, and this is the upper. So the upper has a shoulder that is a little bit wider. So I'm gonna return this back here. There's a little spacer here that also goes, it kind of goes when this is installed, it kind of goes right here in the middle, between the Kingpin and the arm. And I also cleaned up the knuckle. The knuckle, this is where the kind of the ball joint, the Kingpin cap fits in. This is the bottom part of it, and that's the upper part. You can see here the studs that I have for my high steer arms. And when you're cleaning these parts, you have to make sure that the seal surfaces are very, very clean. So what I do is I basically wire brush the surfaces where I have silicone, and I pay particular attention to the bolt holes. So in this case, I clean the bolt holes with paint thinner or parts cleaner, and I actually blow them dry with my air compressor. So you just make sure that they're very clean, there's no dirt. Okay, so these are kind of in order here. So I got the Kingpin, the high side of the Kingpin, the upper Kingpin, the knuckle. This is the lower part of the Kingpin, and this is the flange, the protection for the lower part. It's kind of a rock protection that they sell aftermarket. This one is from DIY 4x4. Quite cheap protection, and even have a grease fitting on it too, so you can grease the bottom Kingpin. And I cleaned the spindle. So this is a spindle. This is an it has been a modified spindle to fit the Overson shafts. So what we did was basically bore the inside, and then we installed a bronze bushing here so that the big 2-inch shafts slide through it. So you got to make sure that the flange surfaces here are very clean. And this is a great opportunity to check, make sure that all the bearings are fine. There's no major damage, especially after everything that we put our buggies through. This is great maintenance, especially kind of in the down season. I checked the inner bearing. This is the inner bearing. It's a little bit larger than the outer bearing. It's got some pitting on it, but this is not a highway vehicle. I'm not going to drive it very fast, so as long as there's no major kind of movement or damage, it should be okay. This is the inside. Make sure that nothing's rubbing, everything's clean. I don't leave any dirt or anything like that, and make sure that the threads are fine. I'm gonna put some grease on the bearing after I'm done. cleaning them. Okay, so this is the hub. So you can see there's a little bit of kind of discoloration. Obviously this bearing is no good for like a trailer or a truck on the road or a car, but for off-road buggies it's perfectly fine as long as there's no major pitting. It's kind of a discoloration, there's no ridges or anything like that. So I make sure I clean it all up really nice, and the other side too. Make sure that you wire brush flange surfaces and make sure the outer bearing is fine. It's just the inner bearing that's got some discoloration, not sure why. And this is my outer bearing. I'm gonna make sure that I grease it properly before I install it. This is an oil, well, it looks like an oil slinger, and I think it's just a spacer and some sort of a grease slinger, if you want to you know what I mean. It kind of goes right on the outer bearing. I think it prevents the grease from going out away from the bearing. So you got to make sure that the raised part goes towards the inside of the hub. And then finally I got my flange cap. This is an aftermarket unit here from Overson, but it looks similar to the stock unit too. The stock unit doesn't have the seal on it, so this is an aftermarket. But I still, like I said, I still put a little bit of silicone anyways, just in case, you know, because I have this silicone anyway because I need to use it for the spindle. So all the parts are cleaned up and they're ready to be assembled. I'm just gonna quickly show you here what I've done. So I cleaned up everything here as well. This is the Overson shaft, just gonna give you an idea how big this thing is. I couldn't believe it when I bought them at first. They're huge. Anyways, I put some grease in the U-joint. I checked the U-joint. I cleaned all the grease off from the Kingpin studs, the upper and the lower, and I checked the boot here. So it was leaking a little oil, a lot of oil actually. And normally, you know, this means that there's a rip in it, but actually this is the first time ever that I have an oil leak, and I checked it all out and there's no hole. So I came to the conclusion that the inner clamp was actually loose. So I tightened it down and I cleaned everything up, and I'm gonna just reinstall it and run it. If it's still leaking, then I take it out, and I have usually 3 or 4 spares that I keep. So for your case, when you're installing the boot, there's a marking on the boot that says top on it. So you make sure you put it on the top. So obviously you remove the inner clamp, and then you can just pull the whole boot out, and then you put the new boot in, and then you make sure that the top is actually at the top. And then I look at it from this position, and I make sure that these grooves, this one and this one, is actually kind of centered as best as possible on the axle with respect to the tubes, to the axle tube here. And then, so there's a big debate now on where to put the actual bolt and nut to hold the inner clamp on. I know there's a space somewhere where here, there's a space on the side that they kind of leave a little opening for you to install the bolt, nut and bolt. I've tried that and it didn't work for me. I don't know why. I think maybe because I'm kind of using the extreme steering for my axle, so what's happening is that the knuckle is actually hitting the nut and bolt. So I tried different positions. I tried at the top, I tried on the sides, everywhere, and honestly, from my experience, no matter where I put it, it's going to hit the knuckle as it's turning. So what I decided to do is to put it actually kind of probably 2 inches from the top, either the front or the back, it doesn't matter. But on this area, it does touch a little bit here, but it's not a big issue. I've never had it fail or leak, and like I said, this is the first time that the bolt got loose actually, so I'm not sure. It's just the nut got loose. So I just retightened it and make sure that it's very tight, and then ready for reassembly. Alright, so I'm ready for assembly here. So the first thing that I like to do is I get a bucket of grease, and then I kind of use it as I'm assembling parts. Make sure obviously everything is clean first. Put a little bit of grease on the upper kingpin and a little bit of grease on the lower kingpin. Okay, so this is a good time here to put the inner clamp, the outer clamp, I mean, for the boot, because before you actually install the kingpin plates, so this is a good time to actually finish it. And what I do is I put the bottom bolt for this clamp on the inner side. This is the side where it doesn't see as many rocks. So, and I put it a little bit kind of right in the middle here at the 10 o'clock position. When you're looking at it yourself, make sure you tighten it really good too, because you don't want it getting loose, like what happened to me with the inner one. It does happen though. So when I'm done, I actually go around with a flashlight to make sure that it didn't slip anywhere. So I don't tighten it all the way now. I'll wait a little bit, but I just want to make sure that it's in place first. So now I'm ready for the upper kingpin arm. So what I do is I just kind of smidge it with grease. They make it when you put grease over it like this, it makes it easier to disassemble later. So I do that on the inside, on the outside, just kind of a little film of grease. Okay, so make sure this is the upper one, and then okay, so what I do now is I put the lower one. Okay, once again, I put grease on it. These kind of position the knuckle in place as you're installing it. The hardest part of this job is actually cleaning all the parts. I just like to clean them to make sure that there's no wear or anything like that. So just kind of coat it with a film of grease, and then it only goes in one way, so you can't really screw that up. There you go. Okay, once that is done, put just a film of grease here. So now I'm ready to put the the upper, the steering arm. Once again, put a little film of grease. Make sure it comes off easy. You saw how easy it was to disassemble, and that's the reason why. Okay, here you go. So that's all done here. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tighten these down with the impact, but you gotta be careful, tighten them at the lowest impact setting. Okay, so I'm not sure how many of you caught on to what I've been doing and noticed that I forgot a little piece. Remember that little spacer here that I told you about? Well, I just forgot to put it. It's okay, I didn't tighten nothing yet, so there you go. So this goes in here on top. And that's why, you know, laying all the parts on the ground would make it easy to know that you forgot something. So I know I'm kind of a little bit of a clean freak. I just make sure that everything is clean around me, so that kind of clear up my mind, so I know I'm not making any mistakes when I'm assembling something. Okay, so now it's all ready. I put the impact on the lowest setting possible, and then I just kind of tighten it. And as you're doing that, okay. All right, so I made sure to kind of slightly tighten these bolts here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually double check that the clamp is still good. My flashlight, just go all around. Didn't slip anywhere or dislodge anywhere. Okay, it's all good. So now what I do is I kind of retighten it a little bit just to make sure that it's 100% tight. Okay, if it is tight, it's not going anywhere. Okay, the next step is I'm going to install the lower cap and the rock guard. So I put, again, a little bit of grease. Makes this assembly easier. A bit of grease. Then a little bit of grease also on the skid plate. Okay. And then I kind of put one bolt in and hold it in place. Make sure before you put the impact on them, just make sure that you have at least one thread threaded. I hate it when somebody just takes the impact and just puts the bolt in and just screws it in without making sure that the bolt's actually in. Because this is the quickest way to strip threads. So all good now. So what I have to do now is I need to torque these bolts. So what I need to do obviously you can see that this is moving. And you can try it like this to make sure that it's not binding on the lower clamp bolt. So as you can see here, I get kind of full steer. Kind of clamps a little bit here, but just kind of near the end stroke. Okay, so what I'm going to do in order to hold the knuckle still, I'm going to connect the tie rod, right? By doing that, it just makes it easy for me to hold it still while I tighten. Okay. Okay. So I got a couple bolts to torque here. So the first one that I'm going to torque are the upper arm helper bolts, I call them. Okay. So these helper bolts are actually kind of extra support that I built myself into them, just to give extra relief to the studs. So these are 3/4 inch bolts. So the 3/4 inch bolts, usually you should torque them about 100 foot-pounds. Okay, and then the next thing that I'm gonna torque are the upper studs. These ones here. These ones here are studs. I think they are 9/16. I'm not sure really what's the maximum torque, but usually like it's 130, 140 pounds, foot-pounds. What I do is I basically torque them for 120. 120 has been always good for me, and so this is what I do. Kind of start slowly. Make sure you torque them equally. You can do it different steps if you want, but I kind of have a feel for it. Here you go. So these are 100 right now. So they're all at 100, and then I give it another 20. Okay. Two, three, four. Okay, it's all good. These are torqued. These are torqued. This one's tight. So the next thing is the lower bolts now. The lower bolts, they are also 9/16, but they're not studs. So I basically what I do is I torque them to 110 foot-pounds. Okay. Okay, so gonna just double check. So I have installed everything here. This, nothing is pinched. Make sure the boot is installed in place. It didn't slip out. No, it didn't. Okay. All right, so once this is all done, the next thing you have to do is you have to put some grease in the grease fittings. So I usually give it about 15 pumps from the top and the bottom. Okay. Okay, so it's all done. Okay, so I got grease grease. Everything's torqued. So now I can actually put the bolts for the steering and torque them. Chances are you do not have the same steering pattern as I have on my buggy. So you can skip this step and do whatever you do for your own steering. I usually torque them to 165 foot-pounds. Okay, so these are all good. Okay, so for the spindle, so what I do is I basically put a little bit of grease on the spindle itself. So what I do here is I just kind of put a layer of grease, because this is where the inner shaft rides on, and I put actually lots of grease in the bushing, bronze bushing. There we go. I have lots of grease here because this surface is where the inner side of the shaft, where the shaft axle shaft here. Just make sure that there's no grease that comes on the flange where it mounts, because this is where we're gonna put some silicone. And same thing for the axle shafts too. Now is to basically put the, so I just put a little bit of grease on the shaft itself. On the shaft, put a little grease here on the shaft as well. And then now I'm ready to actually put the silicone, like a good gasket. So I use the Permatex Ultra Black. This is what I use on everything, except the exhaust, obviously. Okay. So you make sure not to put silicone on in the bolt holes. So you just go around them and kind of put a fine layer. Having a little bit of issues getting the silicone to flow out of this tube. This is not a brand new tube. This is a tube that I've had for a while. So a nice trick to get the silicone to flow is basically to use a drill bit and open it up and then just drill it. As you drill, actually take off the silicone that has been solidified, and you're left with the clean silicone that comes out. There you go. Just make sure that there's silicone everywhere. Okay, so here you go, silicone everywhere. I only put silicone on one face, not both of them. And now I'm ready to assemble. Make sure the flanges are clean. Okay, so if you look at this, there's actually a little notch here. This notch actually goes down. So you have to make sure that the notch on the spindle bolt is actually upwards towards you. I don't really know if it makes a difference or not, but this is how I have always assembled it. Assembling parts with a silicone sealant in between. Technically, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to tighten them by hand and wait a little bit and then retorque them. Honestly, for this application here, it doesn't make a difference. So what I do is I just basically torque them this back. Okay, so I kind of loosen them up a little bit. So I tighten these down to 35 foot-pounds. Alright, so next step now. What I basically do is make sure that my inner bearing is greased properly. This is a great opportunity to check it and to grease it and make sure it's all good. Ready for the next season. Okay, so this is all good. The next thing that I want to do is I want to make sure to grease the bearing for the hub. So for the hub, what I do is at first I got the so I get the outer bearing and I grease that one up properly. Once again, like if this was a trailer, I actually have a special tool for packing bearings, but no, I'm not gonna use it for this. As long as it's greased, there's enough grease on it. I know some people that actually fill the whole cavity with grease, and you know, not really something I would do, because they would put a zerk fitting and then they would pump it up full of grease. Not really my thing, because could you imagine the trouble that I have to go through if I have to disassemble it and reassemble it again? So I put grease all over the outer bearing, and then what I do now is I actually grease up the race for the outer bearing, and then I just put the bearing in, and then I take this hubcap and I just kind of put a little layer of grease over it, and make sure, like I said, the elevated lip goes towards the inside. So once that is done, I just turn the hub around, and now I put grease on the inner seal, inner race. I grease it all up properly. Okay, so now it's ready to slide in. So this, like I said, it's heavy. Just make sure not to damage the splines on the axle shaft as you're doing that. Okay. Alright, here you go. All good now. Okay. So you're all ready now. Actually put the nuts. So I got 2 nuts and 1 spacer in between. Put the first nut. Okay. So for the first nut, you have to torque it to 50 foot-pounds. Okay, so they say you have to torque it to 50 foot-pounds. What I do is I torque it the first time to 50 foot-pounds, and then I turn the hub around. Torque it again, 50 foot-pounds. Turn it a couple times again. Okay, third time, just kind of torque it to 50 foot-pounds. I do it 3 times. Okay, now, so this is done. I haven't always done it like that. What I used to do before is I used to torque the inner nut to 150 foot-pounds and then release it by 90 degrees. So release it and then turn it 90 degrees, loosening. And then what I would do is be done. However, I was reading the manual for it, and I have the military manual for it, and this is what they said you should do. So, anyways, I did it. So for this spacer here, you have some steel tangs on the bottom, and there's a little kind of metal tang here that slips over the opening on the spindle. So what you have to do is basically make sure that this goes on the inside. Here you go. So it's all in. Okay, and then the second nut. So the second nut, I torque it to 150 foot-pounds. I don't bend the little tabs because they have never loosened up on me. So, and plus, if you bend them, then this becomes a consumable item that you have to replace them every time. Alrighty, so torque it to 150. Okay. Alrighty. Okay, so it's torqued to 150. And make sure you clean the grease off the flange, the hub flange, because remember, I'm gonna put a little bit of silicone sealant over it. Okay. Make sure to turn it as well. Put a little bit of silicone sealant over the outer flange. There you go. Just make sure once again not to put any silicone over the bolt holes. Make sure you skip them completely, because especially these bolts. These bolts are actually, I've had some strip on me before when I was trying to tighten them down, because there was a silicone in the hole. Okay. So once again, remember they are a blind hole, so that means there's no opening on the other side. So what this means is that you gotta make sure that the bolts are actually really clean too when you're trying to screw them in, because if they're not clean, then they're gonna get dirt inside. Okay, so these are 3/4 inch bolts. So typically about a 3/4 inch bolt, they get torqued down to about 100 foot-pounds. However, these bolts, they do not need to be torqued down to 100 foot-pounds. And especially because it's a blind hole, you don't wanna if you have something stuck in it and you try to torque them to over 100 foot-pounds, then what's gonna happen is you're gonna strip the threads. And that happened to me before. And then I had to do helicoil and fix them up, and it was a lot of work. So what I do is I torque them to 70 foot-pounds. Okay, so that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll try to kind of mix it up, do some maintenance, some technical advice, and some off-roading trips on my channel. So if you like these kind of things, make sure you like and you subscribe to my channel. I'll keep making videos, as I have time. And if you have any questions or suggestions for making videos, just let me know in the comments.